I don't care how much the listing agent is offering. They're not allowed to pre-negotiate how much I'm worth. How are you going to negotiate your buyer agent commission? How are you going to get paid? Are you going to get signatures from them before you show properties? And how are you going to build value around what you're doing so they don't find someone else that's going to do it for 1% or for $1,900? We'll talk about that today. Welcome to today's morning meeting. I'm Greg Luther, the one guy that meets with you every single week to help you in growing your real estate business. Today, we'll talk about how you get paid in your real estate business because we know all the rules are changing. And here just a couple of weeks away on August 17th, the rules have changed. The way that we do business has changed. And there's a lot of rules that have changed, not just commission. I think a lot of these changes have been kind of shoved to the side because everybody's worried about how they're going to get paid. So we'll talk about that today. We know the seller's compensation to the buyer can no longer be in the MLS. You can no longer have a standard agreement, which there was no standard commission to begin with. But it's changed drastically. And of course, you have to have a buyer representation agreement signed that specifically says how much you will get paid before you can even unlock a door. There is no such thing as a touring agreement. They've already shown that what Zillow was putting out is not compliant. My understanding is there's no way you can utilize anything like that because it's not replacing what's required, which is to specifically disclose how much you're going to get before you show the property. Now that you need to negotiate your commission and the buyer has to pay that if the seller doesn't, now that has to be a specific percentage or dollar amount on that contract before you show homes. Now that you know that the buyers are starting to negotiate it and they're saying, I'm not paying you that much. I'm going to go over here, or I'll use this guy, or I'll go directly to the listing agent. My question for you, and I want you to let me know in the comments here, what do you think will be the average buyer agent percentage over the course of the next several months here? What do you think the average percentage will be there in your own local marketplace? Is it going to be 2? Will it be 2.5? Will it be 3? Will there be flat fee buyer brokers that are out there advertising, which we're already seeing, will represent you for $995. We're already seeing that nationwide. We've seen this in multiple states. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think the average is going to be? And our topic for the day today is to talk about where this is going to be posted. How are agents going to communicate with each other? We've always depended on the MLS to tell us, here's how much the seller's willing to cooperate. And there was kind of a average in any given area. There's no set fee by any means. Commissions have always been negotiable, but there was always kind of an average. You generally are around 2.5, or you're generally around 3%, kind of depending on the area, right? Well, now you can't have that in the MLS anymore. In some areas, it was so prevalent, we didn't even really look at it. We just show all the homes that are available, and we assume this is how the seller is going to play ball with us here. Well, now that's started to change, and it can't be in the MLS, and we're seeing all of these agents online. You're seeing all of this stuff about, you can tell them it's a 2.5 to 3 bedroom, like trying to find secret code, right? Tell them that we would rate this a 3 stars listing, telling them how much the commission is, or putting something inside the home, or putting a sign writer out there so that everybody understands it. I got a question for you, and I want you to really think about this. Who gives a shit how much the seller is offering? It's not what you get. It's not what you charge. And the whole reason for the lawsuit to begin with was because the seller and the listing agent were pre-negotiating how much the buyer broker would be paid. That's the reason for the lawsuit in the first place. Now you're saying the seller will determine how much I'm going to be paid? No, that ain't how we play ball. You know what the court said? Commissions are negotiable. Okay, I'm a good negotiator. I provide great value for my customers, my clients. They're going to love what I offer, and they're going to be fine with me negotiating on their behalf. So what the seller thinks they're going to offer has nothing to do with the contract that we're submitting to them. Why do you care? Why do you even want a starting point? Why do you want to know, well, if the seller's only offering 1.5, at least I can talk to my buyer in advance? No. The seller's also asking $1 million for the home. That's not what we're taking. We're going to write a contract, and we're going to try to negotiate on our behalf. Now, I want you to rewind for a little bit. Rewind a couple of years ago before any of this stuff was even really going on publicly. And I want you to think about the first-time buyer that you had, that they were qualified, they had the income, everything was fine, but they needed help with closing costs. They didn't have money to pay those closing costs out of pocket, but they're highly qualified. It's very simple. You would tell the listing agent, hey, we love the home. We're willing to write an offer on the home. I got a pre-approval letter. These people are good, but they got to have help with closing costs. Regardless of the purchase price, they got to have closing costs because they just don't have the money out of pocket. Now, I know the seller wasn't planning to pay closing costs. I know they didn't pre-negotiate. Well, I'm willing to pay $1,000 towards closing costs and no more. It was zero. But you know what they did? They paid closing costs. So it does not matter what they're offering. I don't care what they're offering. If they want to tell me, great. If the listing agent calls and says, hey, I just want to let you know, my seller's planning on paying only 2%. So just so you know, I don't care. My buyer is planning on paying me 8%. It's negotiable. Now, you wouldn't get 8%, of course, but I'm sure you see my point here that we want to make sure we are, in fact, negotiating on our buyer's behalf. You have to have this signature before you unlock doors, before you show homes. You know, a lot of people are like, well, I'll just get an agreement without the price, and then I'll show them the home. If you show them the home and they like that property, they owe you $0. You are entitled to 0. That's all there is to it. So you have to get your numbers right to begin with. You have to get an agreement in writing. The purpose for us to get this agreement is so we know how much we're trying to put into our purchase contract if we are in fact trying to get the seller to pay it. So if this seller said, if the listing agent says the seller's willing to pay 1%, I don't care. The seller also wants $1 million for the home, but we're only writing an offer at $970,000. I don't care what the seller wants. Now, it's helpful to try and get to a median, but I represent the buyer. I'm not trying to get a win-win. A win-win is if I beat you twice. I am representing my buyer, and if I can help my buyer from bringing $2,000 or $3,000 to closing, especially if they could finance that, if they could build it into their deal and only pay 5%, that's easier for them to pay the 6% interest rate or 6.5%. By the way, rates went down yesterday. Let's hope that continues. That they can get such a great deal on that rather than trying to come up with all the extra money out of pocket. Closing costs, prepaids, appraisal fee, underwriting fee, realtor costs. All of that, those representation and fees that would be involved, I want to try and build that in if my buyer wants me to. Now, some of them are okay paying it out of pocket. But point of today's video, point of today's training is I don't care how much the listing agent is offering. They're not allowed to pre-negotiate how much I'm worth. They're not allowed to say, oh, well, we already told our listing agent we're only paying 2%. Okay, then I'm not selling your freaking house. Because here's our terms. You could also say, I'm not paying any closing costs for but then I'm not selling your house. You could also say, I want $7 million for then I'm not. You remember everything's negotiable. You remember the court stepped in and the Department of Justice stepped in and all of these people are saying the listing agent and the seller are not allowed to preset how much that buyer agent can be paid. That's literally the reason for the lawsuit to begin with. So all of these brokers that are out there and even your MLS that's doing these classes, that people are leaving these classes. Every single board of realtors is doing more classes than they've ever done before because of all these changes. And everybody leaves more confused and more pissed off because nobody knows what they're doing here. I don't care how much the listing agent is offering or the seller is offering. If you want to know in advance so you have an idea how much are we truly negotiating here, that's fine. But if you build value around what you do, you should be getting 3%, 3.5%, or whatever it is for you. You should not be getting what everybody else gets if you offer something that's superior. So for the agents involved in our inner circle where we're offering access to unlisted and pre-market properties before they hit the open marketplace, we can find it clear down to area, price range, neighborhood that buyer wants. We can get a handful of properties where the seller is willing to sell, but they're not yet publicly listed. And no, it's not a pocket listing because they don't agree to list with me. They just agree to pay us a commission for sale by owner. They agree to pay us a commission if we bring our buyer. So it's not a pocket listing. But if we can provide that access, if we're investing our own money in marketing to go out to get those potential properties, of course we deserve to earn more. And more importantly, the buyer would gladly pay you. You are not, here's a voice of reason for you. You are not going to have a hard time negotiating your fee. A buyer will not have a problem paying your fee if you're good at what you do. If you provide value that they can't replace elsewhere. If they can get what you do cheaper, they actually should. So let's have you doing some things that nobody else is doing, that the buyer sees tremendous value in that, and they will defend that you deserve your 2.5% or your 3% or whatever that number is for your area.